Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to be deconstructing a fictional blockbuster, Dhurandhar 2, and we're doing it through the lens of a really detailed critique from the Dhruv Rathee YouTube channel. We're going to explore the argument that this film is, well, a whole lot more than just a movie.
Right off the bat, the source does not pull any punches. It opens with this really provocative claim. The argument here is that the film's primary goal isn't to entertain you, but something else entirely: political advertising. So, how do they even begin to build that case?
All right, so here's how we're going to break this down. We'll look at it in 5 key parts. First, the idea of the film as an ad. Then, we'll dissect the advertising techniques it supposedly uses. After that, we'll do a little fact-checking on the film's claims. Then, we'll talk about what the film might be hiding. And finally, we'll get to this very powerful accusation of gaslighting.
So, the analysis starts in a pretty unexpected place: the film's disclaimer. You know, that text that usually flashes by? The argument here is that it's not just a legal thing, but actually a key tool for manipulation. The source actually calls this standard disclaimer a legal cheat code. And here's the thinking behind that. It lets the filmmakers use real names and events, like PM Modi and Dawood Ibrahim, to make the story feel authentic. But at the same time, it gives them a free pass to change any facts they want for the story. It's kind of like having your cake and eating it too.
Okay, so if the film really is an ad, what techniques does it use? Well, this is where the critique gets into the nitty-gritty of persuasive psychology that it claims is going on.
The very first technique the source points to is something called emotional priming. The core idea is actually pretty simple. You set a very specific emotional mood in the audience to make them more open, more receptive to the message that's coming right after.
So the source highlights this one graphic scene that happens early in the film, one that doesn't really have any connection to the main plot. The argument is that its only real purpose is to stir up feelings of anger and fear, and once those emotions are high, the audience is primed to accept the pro-government story that follows.
Now, this quote leads to what the source calls one of the film's most clever propaganda tricks, and it's not just about what is being said, but more importantly, who is saying it.
And here is that clever little twist. Instead of having an ally praise the hero, which is what we usually see, this film has the main villain do it. The source compares it to a scenario where Thanos admits that he's actually afraid of Spider-Man. See, when your greatest enemy confirms how powerful you are, that praise just hits differently. It feels more credible, more objective.
All right, next up, the analysis shifts gears. We're moving away from these persuasive techniques and into hard numbers, putting the film's narrative head-to-head with publicly available data.
A really central claim in the movie is that any opposition to the government is being bankrolled by foreign powers. The source decides to put that specific claim to the test using actual data.
But when the source digs into the research, it points to data that seems to tell a totally different story. It cites several reports showing significant foreign money flowing in the opposite direction, not to opposition groups, but to organizations that are affiliated with the ruling party and its allies.
Okay, now for a big one: the critique's take on demonetization, which was a pretty controversial policy. The film frames it as this genius move against terror funding.
So, the film's big justification is that over 60,000 crore in fake currency was being used to fund terrorism. But the source went and dug into the official data from the Reserve Bank of India, and let's just say it paints a very different picture.
So what was that number? Just 43 crore rupees. According to the RBI's own annual report, that was the total value of all the fake currency they detected. The difference between the film's number and the official data is, well, it's pretty staggering.
The analysis then makes another interesting point, that what the film doesn't show is just as important as what it does show. It's all about the strategic use of leaving things out to shape a particular story. So the source lays out this timeline of what it calls inconvenient events that are just completely missing from the film. And the argument is pretty clear. If you include things like a major terror attack just 8 days after a diplomatic visit, or you mention prior intelligence warnings before the Pulwama attack, it would really complicate that simple, clean, heroic story the film is trying to tell.
And all of this leads us to the source's final and, honestly, its most serious charge: that this film isn't just propaganda, it's an act of mass psychological manipulation.
The source uses a very powerful term to frame this final argument: gaslighting. At its core, gaslighting is all about making someone question their own memory, their own perception of what actually happened.
It makes you doubt your reality. The critique argues that this film is actively trying to rewrite the public's memory of events that happened just a few years ago. It's telling you that the hardship of demonetization you actually saw and lived through was really part of a master plan. It suggests that events you saw as failures were actually secret successes. It's essentially telling the audience, hey, what you saw with your own eyes, that wasn't the real story.
So in the end, the source concludes that this film isn't peak cinema, it's peak advertisement. The argument is that we shouldn't even be judging it as a piece of art, but rather as a really well-made, meticulously crafted, and very expensive piece of political marketing.
This entire analysis really leaves us with a huge question. When a film uses real events and real people, but then also claims the creative freedom of fiction, where exactly does the story end and the advertisement begin? And maybe more importantly, who gets to decide?